Hello, I'm Robyn Steward from www.robynsteward.com. I'm an adult with Asperger's syndrome living in London in the UK, and I work with people on the autistic spectrum, their families and the services that they access. Today I'd like to talk about transition. When people talk about transition, they often forget that actually we transition between different activities all day long. Transition isn't just about going from, say, primary school to secondary school or from school to college or university. Transition happens all day and in lots of different situations. So a day-to-day example would be waking up and going to sleep. So you're transitioning from whichever activities you've done during the day to going to sleep, and then in the morning you're transitioning from being asleep to doing different activities. On a wider scale, transitioning from one class teacher to another, or transitioning from one lesson to another, or transitioning from one meal to another activity. So transitioning happens all the time. I'm going to try and explain it in a way that makes sense to me, and hopefully it will make sense to some of you as well. I wear different shoes to help me transition from one activity to another. So, this is a pair of standard trainers, and I wear these trainers when I'm going a short distance from my home. For example, if I was just going to the shop. And when I put these on, it's kind of like a floppy disk has gone into my head and it's loaded some specific information about the activity that I'm going to partake in. These shoes, on the other hand, again, they're trainers, but they're different, and I wear them when I'm going to the gym. So a different set of information when I put these trainers on is sort of installed in my brain. Now, clearly, that information has been there the whole time, and I'm not actually putting floppy disks into my brain because I'm not a computer. It's a metaphor that I'm using to try and help explain how my brain works. But putting these shoes on helps my brain to access the relevant information, and also to prepare me for any sudden changes. So, for example, these shoes are my conformist shoes. I wear them for weddings and funerals. So if I'm going to an event where I think that if I wore my shoes that I'm sure most of you have seen me in, these brilliant blue Doc Martens shoes, for some events that might offend other people, and I don't like offending people. So if I'm wearing these shoes, particularly it's mainly for funerals, then I'm starting to become mentally prepared to go to that funeral. So it's a sad occasion, and I'm starting to be able to access the information about where I'm going to far easier, because there's a lot of information, and as a lot of you will know, people on the autistic spectrum often can't filter out information, so you end up with really big chunks of information in your brain and you don't know which piece of information to focus on. So how about another example? Another example for me would be that when I'm working in America or Australia, when I'm talking to people on the phone, I have a bath just before I start working in America or Australia. So, in the UK, at 5 PM, that's 9 AM in America West Coast. And at midnight in the UK, it's 9 AM in Melbourne in Australia. So having a bath just before then gets my brain ready to go and do the next task. However, of course, these sorts of things are very individualistic. So it does depend on the person. The way that transition is often managed in schools is through a system called PECS. PECS is a picture exchange system, and you get a strip of laminated plastic with a line of Velcro on it, and then you have a series of cards which can be stuck onto the Velcro in order that you're going to do them. So the pictures represent the tasks that you're going to complete, and when you've completed a task, you take it off the strip and you put it into an envelope for the next time that you need to use it. PECS can be quite bulky because you need all the cards with you if you're going out somewhere. So there are other alternatives. So a technological alternative would be the Grace app, which is on iPhone definitely, but there's also there's other smartphone applications which could be used. But lots of people, particularly adults, don't want to use PECs. They feel that it's babyish, and that's perfectly fine. And we need to respect how people feel about the tools that they're using, because the tools are there for them. So what else can you do? So here's an example. Take a jam jar and mark the jam jar, say if you've got 4 tasks to do, mark the jam jar with 4 lines, and each line put a number, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then next to the jam jar have a box of sand and a cup. And when you complete a task, you go over and you fill the cup with the sand and you pour it into the jar up to the first line, and that means that you've completed the first task and you're ready to go on to the second task. Now some people on the autistic spectrum find doing a really physical task like that, so you've got up from your desk, you've walked over to wherever the jam jar is, and then you've scooped up the sand and you've poured it. Okay, so that's a physical activity. Some people find that they're useful. Other people find wearing specific clothes very useful. Other people find looking at pictures of where they're going very useful for a transition. But transition can cause a great deal of anxiety for people on the autistic spectrum, and anxiety is often experienced in a different way, probably a more intense way for people on the autistic spectrum. So please don't underestimate the importance of good planning whenever you're doing a transition, whether it's to somewhere new or somewhere familiar, because a good transition can reduce anxiety and make that trip, that event, that class more successful.